All right, welcome back to Learning with Merit. Today we're going to talk about for loops and everything we can do with these kind of loops. So I've already dealt with while loops, and with while loops you have something like this where you say count equals and then maybe 0, and then while count is less than 10, for example. And then you come down here and you say count plus equals 1. And then maybe in here you tell it to print the count. Now this is kind of irritating having to do this over and over and over and over. And so what most people will do, most programmers, is they start to use for loops to do this type of counting. So a for loop has this general form. You use the keyword for, then you give it a variable to work with. So we might say for count, and then we say in range. Now this is a function that we're calling. Range is a function, and the range is how we're going to do the whole start, stop, and step part. So this would be start, this would be stop, and this would be step right there. So just like up here we did these, this is our start, this is our stop, oops, stop, and this one is our step. Now we have a different way to do it. And I would say that for loops are a lot easier, in fact, to have your start, your stop, and your step. I'm going to go ahead, and just so it doesn't get in our way, I'm going to comment that out. So now if we want to do this, all we need to do is give it some values. So if we want to start, let's start at 1. Let's stop at 10. And let's go up by 1 every time. And then all we need to do is print the variable out. So our variable is called count. So I'm going to print that out. You'll notice something interesting. It started at 1 and included 1, but stopped at 9. So it didn't include 10. It went all the way up to 10, but didn't include 10. So there's some things we need to know about what the range function actually does. So I'm going to come down here and let's talk about the range function. So we know that range has a start, has a stop, and has a step piece. So these are all the little variables that we can use in here and give values to. So range has 3 parameters. Okay? The start, the stop, and the step. So range includes start, but not stop. So it starts at 1, but goes all the way up to right before stop. So it includes start, but not the stop. There are also a couple things that it assumes. Let's say, for example, that I did this. If I said range 10, but put nothing else in there, what else is it going to assume? Well, range assumes these things. One, it assumes that start equals 0. It also assumes that step equals 1. So it assumes those two things. If you just give it a value, this is where it stops at. All right? It includes start but not stop. In this case, it's going to include 0 and go all the way up to 9, okay, which is 10 numbers. You do need to keep that in mind. It is 10 numbers when you do that. So range assumes that start equals 0 and step equals 1 if you do not provide those values. So I'm going to comment these out real quick. So start equals 0 and step equals 1 if you do not provide any values. And that's important to know because it can allow you to shorthand, but it can also be a problem later. So now let's look at some other stuff. Let's talk about, let's move this down here. And we're going to comment out these two things so that they're not in our way. And let's start talking about counting up. So this is how we can count up for count in range. And let's say that we're going to count from 1 to 10. We need to do 1, 11, and 1 like that. You could also do for count in range, and you could do 11, like that. But the problem is it's going to include 0, so you got to do 1 comma 11, like that. And since it assumes 1, that will work. So let's add end equals, like that. Let's add end, oops, end equals. And then I'm going to add a print statement in between these two so that you can see on the output the difference. So clear this out. There we go. So, same thing. These two are the same because it assumes 1. Now, one other way you could do it. So you could say for count in range, and you could say 10, like that. Then we need to change something we do in our count. It's count plus 1, like that. If we print count plus 1, well then if it's 0, it becomes the number 1. All right? If it's 1, it becomes the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on, right? So you could also do count plus 1, and this would work. So I'll show you all 3 of these are exactly the same in our code. These are all different ways to do it. Oops. Do not forget your colon at the end. That can be pretty important. So there you go. All 3 of those are exactly the same. They all work the same way. Okay? It just depends on which one you prefer. You could do it that way, you could do it that way, you could do it that way. So that's counting up. Counting down is a little bit different. So we're still going to write. We're going to say for count. It's our variable in range. And now we need to change a couple things. So we have our start, our stop, our step, and our range. Well, this time you got to remember that range includes start but not stop. So if I want to count down from 10, I say 10, comma. And then if I want to stop at 1, I have to put a 0 there. If I don't put a 0 there, then it won't include 1. So let me show you. If I do 10, comma 1 minus 1, that's our step because we want to subtract 1 every time. And then I do print count and equals, like that. Oops. There we go. So if I do this, you'll notice it only gets to the number 2, which is a problem. We want it to go all the way down. So now if I change it to 0 and hit print, now it goes from 10 to 1. So you need to keep in mind that range includes start but not stop. All right? It includes the start but not the stop. What's another way we might be able to do this? Well, let's come down here. Let's add a print statement just for formatting our output. Let's say for count in range. Could we just do that? No, we actually can't. Could we just do this? We can't do this either. And I'll show you. Let me just copy this right here. So the assumptions only work for when you're going up. Right? So see, it does the first one. It does the first one. But if I comment out the first one, I'll show you here, and we try to run this one, it doesn't work because it assumes that step is plus 1. So because it's always assuming that it's going to count up, if I don't tell it -1 there, if I don't do that, it will not work. If I do it now, it works, and it counts from 10 all the way down to 0, which is 11 numbers. So now it works. If I don't specify the step when counting down, I'm going to run into errors, okay, where it just doesn't print anything out. It's not doing what I expected to. So there is no little shorthand for this. You need to specify. You must be clear when counting down. Okay, now multiples are pretty easy. Instead of my step being, 1, it could be 4, for example. All right, we want to step down by 4s. And there we go. 10, 6, 2. Pretty simple. So multiples are not hard at all. Same thing with counting up by multiples. Just to show you, I created a couple of for loops here. This first one counts up by multiples, so we start at 0, we go all the way to 100, and we are counting up by tens. And here's the output for it, right there. This one is for going down. Here we are using count again, and we have range. We start at 100, we end at 0, so we get all the way to 0, and then we're going down by tens. Now, something I want to point out that you need to keep track of is you may have noticed I used count here and count here. And I even used count all the way up here. So there's actually a difference. This count only exists inside of this for loop. This count only exists inside of this for loop, so I can reuse them. Okay, it's about local and global scope. So this count is local. This count is local. Count is local. This count up here that I created, this one, count is global. Alright, so it's outside of everything, so I can use it in lots of different places, wherever I want to. But this count is only in the for loop. Anyway, it's something good to know, because they can be two different things if you're not careful. It's important that you understand that the variable you create for the for loop only exists inside of the for loop. You cannot use it outside of the for loop. It must be inside of the for loop. Okay? If I used this right here and I changed it to x, it wouldn't work outside of the for loop. Alright, so let's talk about nested for loops. Let's say that I wanted to count to 10 and I wanted to do that, 5 times, for example. So we're going to count to 10 5 times. So first we need a for loop to count to 10. So I might say 4. And then count in range. And I'm going to do the simple way real quick. This is a simple way to do it. And then I say print counts plus 1. This will count to 10 for me. Real nice and easy. And then I'm going to add my little end equals like that. But let's say I wanted to do that 5 times. Well, let's just add another for loop. Say 4, repeat, in range, 5. Now, because it goes 0 to 4, which is 5 numbers, it doesn't matter. It's still 5 times, so I can just do this. Then I need to make sure all of this is indented correctly, just like that. And then just to make the formatting easier so you can see, I'm going to say print right there, and that is going to add a new line. New line. That way you can see it. So let me clear this over here and hit run. And now you'll see I counted to 10 5 times. And that can be really easy. Now, I want to show you something really cool. Whenever you don't use the variable inside of the for loop, you do not have to use a full word like this. You can use something called a throwaway. So we use these. So hashtag underscore is a throwaway variable. What this indicates to other people reading your code is that you don't intend to use this variable and it's not important. And so when you do this for underscore in range, all it does is makes it a lot easier for you to not have to worry about another variable, and it still gives you the range that you want. So we do this, and there you go, it does it again. But what if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to print out the count first. So I might do for repeat, and I actually wanted to use it, well then I would use the repeat like that. So print repeat. And let's see what it gives us. So there's 0 all the way to 4, and I've done that 5 times. Okay, so if I'm actually going to use it, I need to use a variable name. If I'm not, like in this case, I I can just use an underscore like that. Let's say I want to go down with a nested for loop. Let's say that I wanted to count down 5 times or whatever. I could say for blank in range, just like I did a minute ago, because I'm not going to use it at 5. And then look at indented for me. That's important. And then I could say for count in range. And I want to count down. Let's count down from 20 to 10. So I'm going to start at 20. And then I am going to go to 10. But you have to remember, it doesn't include the stop. And that's our stop. So I need to do 9 like that. And then I can subtract 1. Okay, I can subtract 1. And then I can say print count, comma, end equals that. Then on the next line, I add my print. You'll notice that I unindented because this is a part of that for loop, but not inside of that for loop. So now if I hit run, you'll see it counts down from 20 to 10, and it does it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. There's another way I could do this. Another way I could do this going down. Let's say I wanted to do well, we'll save that for another time. We'll save that for another time. So that's how we count down using nested for loops, just like that. Now if I wanted to do multiples, of course, I could do -2 like that, hit run, there you go. It does it by subtracting by 2s every time and does it 5 times. Very nice and easy for us. All right, that's all we have for this one. I appreciate you listening and hope you learned something.